Eddie Brock out of darkness. With upside-down skyscrapers as his skyline, Eddie Brock falls downward. He slips from the world we know into Limbo, a more abstract place. A hidden voice watches him fall, describing Limbo as the underside, dark mirror to the human world. After being betrayed by those he trusted, Eddie tumbled down. The person who watches his fall recognizes how many times this has happened and how much he needs a hand now more than ever. In a flashback, Madeline Pryor says she'll lighten Eddie's load. Chasm adds that he and Maddie are going to help him get back to normal. Seems less understanding, prepared to face Eddie as a threat. For Spider-Man, Eddie seems less coherent than usual. Even Eddie's son, Dylan, thinks his father might deserve this. As Eddie continues to fall, he lands hard, bouncing from the force of the impact. Once on solid ground, Bedlam is what appears as the dust settles. Eddie's rage made flesh is how the creature was created. Any good memories Eddie had are gone. Nothing but anger feeding his actions. The Observer continued to narrate the scene, now pointing out how popular Bedlam is with the locals. They even call Bedlam fresh meat. Creatures native to Limbo called technodemons approach Eddie in hopes of using his life glow to sustain them for a while. There used to be more of them, but time's as unkind as everything else in Limbo. A metallic hand, created for destruction, reaches out to Bedlam, and he happily takes it with a loud crunch. Flinging the technodemon through the air, Bedlam exclaims, "Whip it good!" This smashes the threats into pieces of scrap metal as it screams out from the violent attack. Others warn Bedlam that just touching them is enough to get infected by the transmode virus. Metallic tiles climb up Bedlam's red flesh, taking over both of his clawed hands. The Observer explains that technodemons do the opposite of what vampires do. They drain you after making you one of them. Not only is the effect irreversible, but it works on symbiotes too. Something that's made clear from the metal slats slowly covering Bedlam's arms and chest. But Eddie isn't just a regular symbiote. His eyes flash with Null's bright symbol, proving his power to overcome this as the King in Black. A blinding light pierces the sky from Bedlam as he unleashes a roar. The other demons realize their mistake, thoroughly scared. While one flies off in fear, the other questions how Bedlam can resist the irresistible virus they carry. That gives Bedlam enough time to chow down on the demon's head, tearing it from his robotic body. Elsewhere, a voice wonders, "What are you?" Bedlam's already attracted the attention of the ruler of Limbo, and his name is Darkoth. The flying death demon wields a sword, ready to strike him down. As it happens, Maddie Pryor is the ruler of Limbo for Eddie's current time, but for a brief moment, it was Darkoth. Bedlam's teeth glint as he rushes towards Darkoth, not worried in the least. That moment, the narrator explains, splits into two paths, and we have Bedlam threatening to eat Darkoth's brains in both. Darkoth slashes with confidence that he'll win since he has the Soul Sword. In one version, Bedlam is taken down with a fearsome slash that sends his juices flying. In the other, well, Darkoth's not so lucky. Bedlam sends out webbing at the Soul Sword to stop the attack. The strike in the first track surprises Bedlam, who stares at the deep gash in his flesh. That makes him want to attack even more, but in retaliation now. The second track's Bedlam grips the Soul Sword easily thanks to the web, but instead of using it, he cracks it in half while taunting Darkoth with, "Where's your fancy weapon now?" A flash of power escapes the broken weapon. The first track's Darkoth sneers at Bedlam, unbothered by the raging monster. He unleashes a crackle of Promethium-powered hellfire from his antenna, boasting that he doesn't even need the Soul Sword. Likewise, the narrator thinks Bedlam's in a bad spot. But their positions are switched in the second track as Bedlam stabs Darkoth's head with the pieces of the Soul Sword, still calling him a stupid great man, by the way. Bedlam begs Darkoth to stop it, his arm raised to defend himself. But the ruler of Limbo tells him it's too late, continuing to slash Bedlam. The Watcher points out that Darkoth's weapon has vast magical power and it's being used by a trained soldier. In the other version, Bedlam triumphantly holds up Darkoth's skewered head, electricity flowing from its and the demon's body. The King in Black celebrates his victory over the ruler of Limbo when a crumbling Bedlam desperately asks to be spared while Darkoth prepares the finishing blow. Using both arms, he drives his sword deeply into Bedlam's chest and straight through him. But the victorious version has Bedlam observing past events, himself from a previous time. The Watcher reveals that with his powers, Bedlam could ambush those past selves if he wanted. Memories of the Garden of Time, Meridius, as well as his attack on his own son return to him. Bedlam leaps into what the narrator calls the predestined outcome. Or is it? The heavily injured Bedlam from the first track explodes when the soul sword pierces the symbiote heart. Because it destroyed Bedlam's core essentially, it seeks out a new host due to Bedlam being erased from this plane. With Darkoth the only being near it, the symbiote connects with the ruler of Limbo. He tries to flee and finds a stepping disc conveniently available, diving into it for safety. It leads him to Asgard, with the sword left behind on the ground, and Limbo without a ruler. At the same time, the King in Black falls further down into a different place. Now that he's been ejected from Limbo, he's surrounded by darkness and liquid all around him. The observing voice wonders how much more he can fall. As Brock bursts out of the dark liquid, the Watcher explains that he's fallen all the way to him. Not only that, but he walks the path of the magician. Eddie treads through the dark water, repeating his name, unsure if he's remembering correctly. In the distance, a light pierces the darkness as Eddie reminisces that so much was taken from him to arrive at this point, in this place. The narrator agrees that it was necessary to become the magician. He had to sacrifice his ego. Brock continues to walk forward, with the observer taking this time to explain the two dominant philosophies available to magicians. There's white magic, which comes from a place above the world, and black magic that functions within the world and for the world. The latter makes its user's hands black with blood and not clean and pure like the white magic would. At last, he has reached his mystery observer, and it's a sharp-fingered, floating Venom hand. It points out again that Eddie needs a hand, while the man himself approaches with something like awe in his eye. Brock continues to stare while being told he's now reached the unbeyond. It's a place with many names, like the Heart of the Hive. As the King in Black, or former one, it's Eddie's true home, as someone who once utilized the Venom symbiote. The hand glows with flame, lighting up the area, but this place isn't a throne for him. The Venom hand, tiny in comparison to the machine above it, indicates this is actually an engine room. A corridor of light opens up, revealing pipes and a factory-like landscape. The floating Venom demands to know what work Brock needs doing. If he can tell the hand how he arrived here, Eddie can ask a question. Without hesitating, he questions whether his son is okay. The Venom hand finds this interesting, seeing as Brock barely remembered his own name not long before this. There was nothing left of him, his ego almost annihilated, and still he worries about his son Dylan. Eddie's taken aback, worried because the hand knows his son's name, but that doesn't matter. Brock is a mess right now, barely even himself, and Dylan remains the only solid ground for him. Having stabbed him previously, he just wants to make sure his son is safe. We close in on the flaming fingertips of the hand as they confirm that Eddie's son is fine. The Venom hand offers Brock a look into his son's current position. Dylan's using the Venom symbiote and smashing Gold Goblin into a brick wall. Eddie becomes overwhelmed by what he saw, needing answers. But the hand won't expand further, reminding Eddie he has 4 questions left. The guide questions what led him here, and he says, Meridius, and wants to know how to stop him. The Hand grows tired of Eddie's feigned ignorance, knowing the man has the answer. With the help of his other and his son, Eddie can succeed, but the Hand wonders how far he'll go to reach them. Eddie knows he's willing to go to the end of the world, more specifically the Garden of Time. Trees and vines fill the water he stands in from his memories of that place. The Hand observes that these memories of any he possessed before have returned so vividly. Eddie lets the liquid slip through his fingers, describing the garden as a soulless, plastic hell made from the corpses of all the other symbiotes. The Hand wonders if he only sees it as a scene of a crime, so Eddie specifies that it was his crime. The Observer wonders if it's due to Meridius being Eddie's future. It's instead that he's the past of that man. The image of a grinning Null haunts him still. Eddie understands now that he took over Null's role without knowing what would happen to him afterwards. As the voice of the Void, Null's considered worse than just evil. He's unbeing, and Eddie wanted to reject that by trying to become everything. He wanted the symbiotes to be an army and give them freedom, but he was also the king, and that meant they couldn't disobey his authority, his crown. In the future, the Clintar's minds, those who inhabit the planet of symbiotes, are destroyed by Meridius to become like furniture. And it's unclear if it was a sudden change in personality or if it was something impossible to change due to Eddie's decisions. He realizes his true question from this. Pointing at his guide, he demands to know whether or not there's a point to the King in Black's power and what it can achieve. The Hand reiterates that there's two philosophies of magic, with the white being used by people like Doctor Strange, who deny themselves of worldly things and considered more like heroes, and the dark side, where people like Kalu work within the world trying to change its broken hearts. Dark magic influences them to want more tangible things, often producing villains. Neither one's better than the other at its base. In fact, there's another engine room. That place is where the Beyonders do their work, far beyond where the living plane is found. They're known as the Ivory Kings, or the Kings in White, as Eddie dubs them. The Hand summons a massive globe, darkened by Venom's influence and being controlled by the symbiote. Its teeth digs into the planet, leaving its mark. Onyx Kings are the ones doing work within the world and bound by it. This makes them forced to work through the messy goo of the life there and be sullied, unlike the Kings in White. Both sides are meant to work in symbiosis with the universe. Regardless, as a king, Eddie's meant to work with his designated engine, just like the Beyonders, and only him. His options are to keep the world from collapsing or to embrace the eternal end like Null had before him. Eddie struggles with this information, knowing how heavy a burden it places on him. How insane of a task this is. He can't be entrusted with this. It's not fair. The Observer says Null believed the same thing. Eddie points to the Hand, demanding it find someone more suited for this job. The same as Null had as well. Now this angers Eddie. He's fuming and spitting in frustration. He didn't choose this, and he doesn't want this job. There's no reason he has to do it. Why did they choose him specifically?
Why does it have to be me?
He demands with a heated fury. The Hand just calmly repeats that Null said the same. Pointing to, with more insistence, the Observer lets Eddie know that everyone eventually reaches this point. It's part of the way the world works. The Hand approaches, more severe and aggressive, as it explains that the Kings in White were handed the easier position, whereas he and Eddie have no choice but to get dirty with their work, and to be in pain from it. In a time before time, Null, who had that role, wasn't able to handle it, but the Celestials were still willing to offer him a job. Yet, instead of accepting, Null lunged at them, ruining his chance forever. That, in turn, made Null responsible for nothing, since he became a god of the void. At that, Eddie recalls the infamous line about with great power, realizing that Peter Parker's a better fit. The Hand agrees that he was in fact born for this role. And yet events happened and he's not part of the equation now. Instead, Eddie's left to fulfill the task since Peter cannot. Eddie wonders if Meridius also refused to take the ride. The Hand immediately asks, "Is that your fourth question?" Eddie backtracks, admitting that he knew Meridius rejected this position, not wanting to become the Hand that leads others. More importantly, he wants to know who exactly this guide is. Giant glowing eyes appear behind the Hand, confirming that he's another Eddie Brock, but also so much more. He's the eventuality. Unlike with Null, whose path was simple: destruction, failure, and then his demise, Eddie, as the true king in black, has more twists and turns. He has power, the throne, and a curse like the others. But he breaks the chains of time and moves in a non-linear way. This was already proven when he fought Darkoth and created 2 tracks. Eddie's destined to move forwards and backwards, reliving the past, but discovering new futures also. At times, the power will be lost to him, but in other versions, he'll regain it and lose it again. The Hand knows this because he can see the whole map, and no matter which way Eddie goes, he always ends up back here with the eventuality. And after many more times and countless roads, Eddie will be the one to supervise. The term confuses Eddie, so the eventuality explains in a more visual way by plopping into the symbiote goo. It explains that Eddie will do like him and ensure the Venomverse continues on without another Null mishap. The Hand emerges a sinister version of Eddie with Null's symbiote armor and a glowing eye. The eventuality offers the possibility that he, once renewed by the cosmic void, could end up the next Null instead, acting as a test to make sure Eddie's role is being maintained. The Hand jokes that it could be something else entirely, eager to enjoy his retirement. Eddie's irritation is clear as he notes that he's stuck on the factory floor. The Hand admits that they're all stuck in their positions, unable to get out of them, which is what created Meridius and this guide. Eddie gets it now. In a multitude of ways, he becomes this eventuality somewhere down the line. But what escapes him still is who he is now. In reality, his body is a charred skeleton, nothing as complete as he currently looks. The Hand admits he gave him a body temporarily, but Eddie interrupts, annoyed with the mystery again. He accuses the Hand of using riddles, demanding to know what this body is. He assumes it's some goo construct, but at the same time, it feels all too real and aches and itches like his original body. Eddie breaks down, questioning what he is and how this can be. The eventuality encourages him to believe in the power he has because he can use it to save his son and anything else that's important to him. With an encouraging nudge and the words, "Just let yourself see it," Eddie's missing eye begins to regrow in his skull. The Hand reminds him that Dylan had an easier existence due to being born with symbiote DNA, while Eddie's taking a harder road. His mind had no choice but to seek out a new body. And in the Garden of Time, there was a feast of dead symbiote flesh. The eventuality clarifies that any body Eddie commands is his to own. The Kings in Black may share symbiote bodies, but Eddie owns his body when he's inside it. The Hand prods at Eddie now, having offered all the information he could. "What are you gonna do?" Eddie grips his head, realizing all too well that he has to correct mistakes and fix what's broken himself. Eddie Brock turns away from the eventuality, eyes focused in a black spider symbol appearing across his chest. He balls up his fists, moving forward now, and announces,
I'm gonna kick my own ass.
If you enjoyed this storyline, check out what happens next.